So I've just finished Authority by VanderMeer. So this this book here is it's all 3 books, the whole Southern Reach trilogy in one book, which isn't even that big when you put them all together. But just an aside, physically I love this book. I love how it's so easy to read because the pages just flop and stay open. It has this nice, like, really it's soft, but it's like a matte like cardstock texture cover. It just feels so good. It's so easy to read. Anyway, so yeah, I got it really cheap too. So yeah, so I just finished the second one, Authority, which was really good. I mean, the first one was really good too, but this one was good in a different way. It almost reminded me of who's the author of Harrow the Ninth, and Tamsin Muir. The way her series, each book is totally different. Okay, not quite that much, but this book, the first one is around this character, the biologist, that's going into Area X and experiencing all kinds of weird phenomena there. This one is it takes place after the events, kind of just after the events of the first book, Annihilation. But it follows this new director of the Southern Reach, named John Rodriguez, but he goes by the name of Control, which is like pretty cool. And it starts out a lot of office politics and stuff, which was kind of enjoyable, honestly. So he's newly appointed to the Southern Reach as the new director, because the old director was the psychologist from the previous book who led the last expedition into Area X, and of course did not return. We saw in that book that the psychologist, or the director, died. I think she was pushed or jumped off of the lighthouse and died. In fact, the only character that seems to have survived is the biologist, who at the end of Annihilation, I think, was going on a boat to see if she can find her husband on this island off the coast of Area X, or still within Area X. Anyways, so there's this new director who's taken over, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, not in Area X, but in the Southern Reach. So in sort of I don't want to say headquarters, but the place where the expeditions are trained and sent out from. Yeah. And he comes up against the assistant director, Grace, who's this woman who, I don't know, it's not explicitly stated, but I don't know if this is just me, but implicitly I believe she had some sort of relationship with some sort of romantic relationship with the previous director. She's very much like, no, the director's not dead, she's coming back. You're just here as acting director. I'm going to do my best to sort of sabotage your work and make life hard for you. And so there's a bit of a cat and mouse game between the two of them. And basically in the end, the director, Control, whose POV we're following, loses that sort of that game and cedes control basically of everything to Grace, to this assistant director. But anyways, so throughout that we meet characters like Cheney, who's like the head of the scientists, and Whitby, who's, I don't even know, Whitby's in the science department, but he's like kind of weird, and he's sort of a jack of all trades. He's done enough of everything, and he's been in Southern Reach for so long that he knows everyone and he knows how to do everything. But yeah, it starts out, the mystery's not so much with Area X, but with the Southern Reach, with the agency that's trying to learn about Area X. And we find out that this Control guy, he's not really that good at his job, which is always interesting because it's his POV, so we don't see him as being incompetent, but Grace clearly thinks of him as incompetent, and we find out that he has worked in sort of intelligence agencies, CIA, I assume. It's referred to as Central. Or maybe it's FBI. because it's internal. Anyways, some sort of agency, and he's worked different jobs. He's never been really good at them. In fact, there was one situation where he flirted with this girl while he was undercover, and it ended up getting the girl killed. And yeah, we find out that he only has this job because his mother gave it to him. His mother's like really high up in Central. She's been doing this for years, so he's a bit of a nepotistic, someone who has their job just through nepotism. And the whole course of this book only takes 2 weeks. We only have the events of 2 weeks, and by the end of the 2 weeks, things really ramp up. So it doesn't seem to be, I mean, there's the mystery of Area X, but we seem more to be dealing with Control trying to figure his way into this organization, the Southern Reach, and trying to figure out, like I said, the politics and the social norms and whatnot of this area, or of this place. And so he has the people from the previous expedition who have been found, much like the expedition before them, have been found somehow. They went into Area X, and somehow they got out. No one knows how, because there's only one way in and out. But they showed up just at their place of residence. And so they've been collected and brought back to the Southern Reach, and they're supposed to be debriefed and interviewed, like what went on in there, how did you get out, etc. But he ends up sending the surveyor and the anthropologist. He ends up sending them to Central. He's like, I don't need them. It's the biologist. The biologist is the key to all this. So he keeps the biologist, who's the main character from the last one. And remember, the anthropologist and the surveyor died in the previous book, much like the biologist's husband. I don't know if he did die, but a clone of him had somehow escaped Area X in the last book, and but it wasn't really him. That seems to have happened again, where there are these clones of these people from the last expedition that have somehow made it out into the world. The biologist, however, we know from the last book that she didn't die, so it's kind of questioning, like, is she one of these clones, or is it actually the biologist? And she, throughout these interviews that he has with her, these interrogations, it seems that she is different, like she's kind of faking that she's the same as the others, but she's actually the real person. But then by the end of it, she says, she just explicitly states, I am not the biologist. She goes by Ghost Bird, which was the nickname her husband gave her in the previous book. But anyway, so is this actually the biologist? Or is this a clone of the biologist that has her memories? And it seems to be that it is another one of these clones. Much like her husband, or her husband was cloned in the last book. Anyways, I use the word clone loosely. A copy of an individual created by Area X. So he's trying to figure all this out. In the end, the biologist gets sent away to Central without his permission. Control has a retainer, is that the word? Someone at Central who checks in on him, known as the Voice. He doesn't know who this voice is. He thinks it could be his mother, it could be his grandfather, who's also is in the spy profession but is retired. It turns out that this voice is this guy Lowry, who is the only survivor from the first expedition, who works in Central now. So Lowry has been hypnotizing Control throughout this whole book, and using him to sort of figure out what's going on and regain control of Southern Reach. But Control figures out that he's being hypnotized, and has this clever way of twisting it back on the Voice, and sort of not breaking him, but freeing him from the Voice's hold. But his mother finds out, and his mother shows up and sort of speaks to him in person, like, okay, it was Lowry. We hypnotized you to keep you safe, plausible deniability, giving you that and all that stuff. Anyway, so that's when stuff starts to get weird. So he goes and watches a video. There's a video recording of the first expedition that Lowry had filmed, and it's very unsettling. Characters are described as talking some sort of unknown language, and then another one responding in English as if he understands the other. There seems to be some horrible thing off camera that kills these two people, but then in the next scene, the people are totally fine. The other people are totally fine that these people have been killed and don't seem bothered by it at all. It's just very weird and unsettling stuff that sort of has some physiological effect on Control after he watches it. Like, protocol is you can't watch this for a lot more than an hour, because it must have some effect. I mean, it's a visual and audio representation of Area X, and it seems like just watching it, you're getting a glimpse into Area X, and it's having an effect on you as if you were in Area X. Anyway, so that's one of the weird things that happens. He also, like, when it gets really strange, the day before everything goes haywire, he goes into this supply closet where he'd found Whitby at one point, like surprised Whitby there, and he discovers that the ceiling is a false ceiling and there's a trap door in there. He goes up the trap door, climbs the ladder, goes in, and he finds another room where there are these weird grotesque paintings on all the walls around the faces of all the people who work at the Southern Reach. And then he, like, it's a very horror movie. He sort of like senses a draft, but he's like, why is there a draft? No, it turns out it's breathing. He slowly turns around, and there's Whitby, like, curled up in a shelf, like hands length away from him, breathing down his neck. And Whitby's like eyes wide, breathing heavily, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, Whitby's apparently been living here. He's painted these things. He's like gone nuts. What's happening? So Control just slowly leaves, goes back home. The next day he shows up and he's like, okay, I got to deal with Whitby. What am I going to do? But he puts it off and he puts it off and he puts it off. And then eventually he's like, it's like 6 o'clock at night. He's like, okay, I got to deal with this. So he goes down to the science department. He goes to open the door and he can't find the handle. It's like kind of dark. So he's like reaching for the handle, the doorknob. He can't find it. So then he presses up against the door, and the door isn't there. It's been sealed over, and it's a wall, but the wall is like fleshy and feels alive and has some give to it, which understandably freaks him out. So he's screaming and running through the place. He's pulling all the fire alarms, telling everyone to get out. Something's going weird. As he's doing this, he sees Grace, the assistant director, has the door open. There's people running out. He notices Grace has this door open. He turns, and then in the cafeteria, he sees Whitby mumbling in this weird, unintelligible language. And he tries to grab and get a hold of Grace, but she is staring and smiling at none other than the old director, the psychologist, who is walking towards the building. And it's described as behind her there's like flowing emerald lights and this brightness. And so Control's freaking out. He runs, gets in his car, he speeds away, gets on the highway, goes all the way back to his home. His mother finds him, and she's like, reveals to him that the places where the surveyor and the anthropologist had been found, there was some sort of a contaminant in there that has now blossomed into something larger. So it seems like they had brought pieces of Area X out with them, like seeds of Area X that are now growing into either new Area X's or some sort of doorway into Area X. However, the location where they found the biologist, this empty parking lot, which if you remember from the first book, she was a big fan of these microhabitats, such as you would find in an abandoned parking lot. There's no such thing. And also that the biologist has escaped from Central. And so they're thinking that the biologist is now going to go and corrupt some new place, just like the anthropologist and the surveyor had done. It's also revealed that Area X, which its border had been stable, although there were some questions with a linguist about using the term border to describe it, because that word doesn't really make sense. Anyways, the border has expanded, and with the director psychologist, the old director, coming back, she had brought with her something that had greatly expanded Area X. It seems like the border is non-existent now, and it's just continuously expanding. It's going to overtake the whole world or whatever. But Control decides he's going to go and find the biologist, and I think his mother kind of suggests that he do that. And so the final chapter of the book is him journeying to the Northwest, where he assumes the biologist, from what he knows of her, is going to be where she's going to be, and he eventually gets there, and he does find her. And she talks about she's not sick anymore because the brightness that was inside her, which is the same way she described it in the first book, has left her and has manifested itself in this pond or something. The bottom of this pond, there's this light, which seems to be an entryway into Area X. And as they're talking, they can see Area X growing and expanding in the distance, and so they both decide to jump into the pond and enter this new portal or whatever into whatever. And that's how it ends. And it's pretty wild. Before the old psychologist director shows up, there is some suggestions, like Control goes to her house and finds the door unlocked, and there's some suggestions that she's not dead, she's there, or at least her clone is there. So there is some hints at that. There is also, in her office, she had written those words that the biologist had saw written in sort of living ink along the wall of the tower. That weird series of words that the words don't make sense on their own, but it's not so much the words as the pattern of the words, or like the way the words are written, communicate more than what the words themselves actually convey. I don't really understand it. It's weird, but weird in a good way. Yeah, it's also revealed that the psychologist director is the little girl who is in the photo with Saul Evans, the lighthouse keeper, that the biologist finds in the first book in the lighthouse, and also the director has had in her office on the wall. And so that's why she went on this last expedition, because she's from this area, she knows this area. It's also revealed that she went on an expedition, she went in on her own without anyone's permission at one point, and came back and retook her role as director. So like, that's kind of crazy. And then finally had this expedition, went in there. From the first book, we see she was pushed off the lighthouse and died. However, some version of her, some clone of her, has returned and has unleashed Area X on the rest of the world. Whew. Yeah, no, it's wild. I don't know what's happening. But there is a third book, and I think a fourth book forthcoming. I think the third book, which I'm about to start, I think from what I hear is that it's not chronologically after the second book, but it might take place even before the first book. Which isn't great, because I want to know what happens after the end of the second book. But I could be wrong. We'll see. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. They're really well written. They're very descriptive. They've got great vocabulary. Very mysterious, but very real and down to earth. Yeah, like just weird in a good way. So that was Jeff VanderMeer's Authority.